Does anyone remember an old show called Learning with Barret Bear? Or maybe it was Life Lessons with Barret Bear? Either way, the main character was called Barret, a puppet of a Canadian black bear. Barret was a kind of innocent within a chaotic world. He was meant to reflect the children who were watching, learning about pretty serious issues in a way they could digest. The video store I went to in my youth had a small selection of Barret tapes, but I can only vividly remember one. A tape discussing drug awareness or something like that. I guess the war on drugs was still a big deal when this came out. Just to put a little loose time reference on things. It started out with Barret and his friend or father figure, Mike, eating at an ice cream bar. Mike was the only non-puppet character in the series, just a normal-looking dude with a personality of cardboard. Barret and him made some lame jokes while eating their ice cream, then left to head to the park. On the way over, they stumbled across another reoccurring character in the series, one that gave me the creeps every time he came on screen. I hated this thing. His name was Ricky the Rat, and you could probably guess based on the name that he was a rat puppet. But not a normal-looking puppet. He didn't have that Jim Henson charm so many kid show puppets have. Ricky was mostly hairless and covered in boils. He kind of looked slimy, like he'd be wet to the touch, and his eyes were so bloodshot they almost glowed red. This is probably intentional since he was the villain of the series, but it still feels like overkill to look back on. Mike and Barret stumbled upon Ricky just as he crawled out from the pile of trash nestled in a grungy alleyway. Ricky pulls out some drugs that he tries to push on the guys. Then we get a dramatic music sting before transitioning to a short variety segment. Just like Sesame Street, Barret's show featured little shorts that appeared throughout the main story, sometimes a cartoon or maybe a puppet show. Each video would have maybe 3 or 4 of these, all connected to the themes of the episode, drugs in the case of this tape. My memory is so faint on all of this, but I think the first short was something with marionettes, string puppets in other words. They were dancing on a little stage. Everything was very handcrafted looking. I can't remember much from this short. It was 20 years ago after all, but I'll give a better description on other segments. Doing my best here, even the things I do remember could be entirely wrong. Okay, so we get the little dancing clown puppets. Then it's back to the main story. Ricky the Rat is trying to push his drugs. I think he specifically had heroin inside little needles and everything. But Barret just declines the offer, claiming he heard drugs were bad for you. That's right, says Mike. Only losers use drugs. Mike then gives an informative rant about the negative effects of drug use, what they do to your body and how it can be hard to quit. Pretty standard drug education. Ricky then responds with something like, "You guys are a bunch of nerds," or whatever. Then Barret responds back with something lame like, "I'd rather be a nerd than a loser." Like I said, this is all standard stuff for a drug PSA, nothing wrong with it. I'd even say the information holds up for the most part. The tape up to this point would be perfectly fine to show to a kid if you wanted to teach them about the hazards of drug use. But then the tape keeps going. Barret wraps up his inspiring speech, then instantly stunned by the sight of Mike buying heroin off of Ricky. Mike gives the disgusting rat creature a little fist bump before looking back to Barret like nothing happened. "Come on, Barret, let's get to the park," says Mike. "We don't need to waste a beautiful day like this on drugs." Confused and clearly distressed, Barret nodded his head and follows Mike to the park. I remember Barret taking one more glance back at Ricky, watching the rat count his dirty money before the show transitioned to another short. As a kid, that shit was heartbreaking to watch. Why would Mike say one thing and do another? Well, as an adult, I've met far too many people that do just that. The second short was odd. It was like a blend of live action and stop motion. There was a live actor dressed like a 50s housewife, and she was desperately trying to tend to all of her chores before her husband came home. I think her kids were super cheap hand puppets, and they all acted super manic and hyper. It was clear the woman was overwhelmed and about to have a mental breakdown. That's when a stop-motion character appeared on the TV, advertising a miracle drug that boosts energy. He reaches his hand out of the screen and gives it to the woman. She takes the drug and gets a big boost of energy to finish her chores, just like the ad said. She runs around the house at a comedic speed, then come to a screeching halt at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee as she waits for her husband to return. When the husband arrived, he was depicted as a giant stop-motion dinosaur who ended up destroying the house anyway. I might be missing some context to this one. We fade back to Barret and Mike at the park. There's a cute little montage of them playing on the swings, going down the slide, and generally just having fun. Then Mike sneaks off to go shoot up. As soon as Barret starts to notice his missing, Mike is already back and they keep playing. The montage continues as before, but Mike starts to show signs of getting high. He looked all giddy and could barely stand up. The scene just ends with Barret watching Mike act foolish. It's an uncomfortable white shot that just lingers without any music. The third short segment kicks in after that, entirely done in claymation. It shows a guy lighting up a cigarette before zooming into his chest. We see his lungs now anthropomorphized and also smoking. The lungs start to bleed and decay as they turn black. We pan back out to the man laying on his deathbed. He looks very ill but still lights one more cigarette before croaking. I feel like the short should have ended there, but it kept going, showing the man's body rot away in a pile of bones. That last bit was overkill. They really didn't need it. That didn't really add anything to the message, but I also feel like this tape was made by sickos that just wanted to disturb children. So, whatever. Barret ended up dragging Mike back home, made sure he was comfortable, then set out to find Ricky. I'd say this goes about as good as you'd expect, but it actually goes worse than that. The tape was a bit strange up to now, but this is when it straight up scared the hell out of me. Barret finds the rat and confronts him about Mike's condition, saying he should be ashamed and all that noise. Ricky lets that bear ramble for a little bit, then before taking out a knife and holding it right against Barret's nose. The little black bear instantly shuts down. I can't remember what Ricky said next, but it was something intimidating. I was too scared at the time to really listen to his words, but I remember the actions quite well. After his speech, Ricky pulled one of his heroin needles out and held it close to Barret's neck. Even as a child, I remember the threat. Barret needed to back off, or Ricky was going to get him hooked against his will. It was so disturbing to see this set this time. This tape started with an optimistic, innocent bear that lusted for the good in life, and now he was cowering from the threats of the scum of the earth. I think he may have even pissed himself, but that can't be right. Perhaps a false memory. Anyway, Ricky put the needle away after making his very aggressive point, then just left the scene, leaving Barret alone in the alleyway. I just sat and watched as this poor little bear sobbed. I began sobbing with him. I recall one more short after that, this one being computer animated. It wasn't good computer animation, but I guess it's better than anything I could do. The plot had something to do with a guy stealing money to go buy drugs. My memory unfortunately fails me again on this one, but I strongly remember the visual of the drug addict stealing the money from his mother's purse. I think I left the room on this one because the animation style just creeped me out so bad. It'd be interesting to find a copy of this somewhere so I could piece it together better, but I am also not sure if I even want to revisit this. Maybe a rewatch would help me heal from the trauma. Hard to say. Bert returns home in the final act. Mike is doped out on the couch, and the whole vibe of the scene is very depressing. Barret looks to Mike, sniffles a little, then keeps walking. I think he said something about going to spend time with Mom. He walks down the basement and starts looking around. It was a very dark and dirty scene to shoot in. The old analog camera could barely pick up any light, though. Barret was somewhat visible. He looks around and gently calls for Mother. I expected Barret's mother to be another black bear, such as himself. Something else ended up crawling out of the darkness, though. A humanoid shape, wrapped in a tattered clothing with a bag over its face. Any skin that was exposed was covered in boils and welts. It moved across the floor with two very crooked arms, and a deep wallowing sound came from its mouth, like the noise of a sick cat would make. The creature, person, whatever it was, crawled up against the wall and started beating it rapidly until its hands bled. Barret backed up the stairs and started shivering. The last thing I remember from the tape before it cut to credits was Barrett's final line. I don't feel safe anywhere. Oh, I felt sick to my stomach after watching that, and I kind of feel the same way after talking about it just now. Some days I question if this was even real or just a weird dream I had. But I know I saw several of these tapes at the video store. There was one about stranger danger and another on gun safety, or maybe I dreamed all of that as well. Reflecting on your childhood could be a strange thing at some times. I guess I just want to know if another human being has ever came across this series before, especially the one I just described. Any info helps. Thank you.